morning, everyone. How are you doing today? We are so glad to have you here with us. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Glasscock School of Continuing Studies and to welcome you home to Rice. I'm Kathy Maris. I'm the Assistant Dean for Community Learning and Engagement here at the Glasscock School. And I'd like to start by thanking Dan Stipa and his colleagues at the Association of Rice Alumni. They plan, create, and organize this event every year, and they really provide the leadership and the hard work in putting Classroom Connect together, and it is an enormous undertaking. So we're very honored to host Classroom Connect. It's very well aligned with our work here at the Glasscock School. We are the only school at Rice that's devoted solely to community education, and we're, as such, the largest outreach division in the university. We have more than 16,000 enrollments a year in over 700 in-person and online and hybrid courses. And we end up serving throughout those courses learners from age 3 to our oldest student, who was 99 years old. So we have offerings that are serving preschoolers through high schoolers, young professionals to retirees. So there's really something for everybody at the Glasscock School. Our programs range from one-day events to short courses and certificates, and also include some graduate degrees. And they're in the areas of community learning and engagement, pre-K through 12 education, graduate liberal studies, and our master's degree in teaching, English as a second language and 8 foreign languages, philanthropy and nonprofit studies, and professional studies. And the school really serves as what I think of as a bi-directional bridge between our campus and the city. And we are sharing Rice's world-class teaching, like you'll experience today, as well as its research and creative work, and connecting our campus to our dynamic city and to learners around the world. And while we focus on sustaining our many outstanding legacy programs, we also strive to be nimble and dynamic and seek to anticipate and respond to the changing needs of our city and of our world. So we spend a great deal of time here thinking about what it means to live and work and learn in a world that's changing at a remarkable pace. And that's a topic that you'll hear more about from our first speaker this morning. Throughout our work, we seek to equip learners to face the future and thrive in a world of constant change by reimagining learning not as a place or a phase of life, but as a way of life. And clearly that's something you all embrace by being here today. Many of the sessions today have an overarching theme of exploring what may lie ahead in the future. And it's a future that feels like it's coming at us faster than ever. And yet in many ways, we're also exploring what it means to live now in a unique moment in history when rapid change is part of the fabric of life. This includes demographic change, technological change, political change, social change, environmental change, and much more. And against this backdrop, embracing learning as a way of life is not a luxury, it's a necessity. So today I hope you'll have a joyful, immersive experience of going back to school. And I also hope that you'll realize that you're doing something so much bigger. You're helping to shape the world and city we live in, thrive at the intersections of people and ideas and the physical and the virtual, and hopefully become a more conscious, thoughtful, engaged, equitable society. So thank you all so much for being here. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Margaret Beier is Associate Professor in the Department of Psychology at Rice University and the Director of the Industrial Organizational Psychology area. She also serves as a Magister of McMurtry College at Rice, and her research interests focus on predicting success for adults in organizations and educational settings. This includes examining psychological constructs like cognitive abilities, attitudes, personality, motivation, domain-specific knowledge, and individual differences in gender and age. Dr. Beier also directs the Adult Skills and Knowledge Lab at Rice. She teaches undergraduate courses in research methods, psychological testing, personality theory and research, plus an array of graduate seminars, including personnel psychology. Dr. Beier has also taught at the Glasscock School, including in our spring 2018 course, The Future of Work. She's been described by Glasscock students as an outstanding professor with a great love of teaching. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Margaret Beier.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here today. What a great weather we have for spending a day learning, right? Inside with lectures. My sister is here today. I just wanted to say everything's relative. She is here from Minnesota, escaping. She came kind of unexpected to escape the weather up there. So could be 12 inches of snow in April. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I am an industrial and organizational psychologist. You may wonder what that is, and this is something that you can keep in mind when your kids and grandkids say, I want to be a psychology major in college. So this is something that you can do with psychology major. I study the psychology of work. So we study worker well-being, we study how to select employees, how to develop tests to select employees. So both on the organizational side and on the employee side. So we're interested in the experience of work, the human experience of work. And so my area in particular, as Kathy said, is lifelong development. So looking at how people transition from high school to college, college to work, and work to retirement. And so I look at development. Usually psychologists look at development up through, the age of 18, and then we're kind of like, okay, everything's done. But I study development kind of into the future. And so you guys are like my people, right? You guys are people that I'm super interested in because you're continuing to engage. All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about the future of work. I am not an economist, and I'm not a sociologist. I'm a psychologist, as I said. But I'm going to I want to frame the psychology of the future of work within what's going on in our larger society, in terms of the labor force, in terms of the types of jobs that are available. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about at first is kind of crystal ball stuff, right? It's a little bit of prediction. We don't know what's going to come for sure, but we know kind of where things are moving and where things are changing. So I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've read that have been published in some of these literatures and in the popular press. And then I'm going to talk to you about the psychology of work and how these two things kind of come together. Okay, so I first started getting really interested in this topic a few years ago. I was asked to help with a conference that was scheduled here at Rice on the future of work and technology. And it was a conference that was scheduled, that was developed mostly by computer scientists. And so the first day of the conference was really about how, isn't it great that we're going to design all of these technologies, and these technologies are going to take over jobs, and people aren't going to have to do anything all day. And isn't that great? And we are going to have like universal income that will come from I don't know where, but we're going to have it, and people will just be able to sit around and not do anything because the robots are coming to take our jobs, basically. And this, of course, as a social scientist, is a little disturbing because we don't really think maybe it's great that people are just kind of sitting around and not doing anything all day. And it's arguable. That stuff is very arguable. Technology historically doesn't tend to make us less busy. It tends to make us busier. So, we have a historic precedent that it's not going to actually end up being that way. But that kind of information has really infiltrated into the popular press, and there's been a lot of kind of scary stuff that's associated with. So you can kind of look at the New York Times. Will robots take away your children's jobs? How will automation change work, its purpose and its meaning? These are really super important questions. I am not sure, again, that work is going to take over, that technology is going to take over everybody's job. I'm a little bit more optimistic. So this is the optimist's guide to the robot apocalypse. So there's a lot of kind of scary stuff about what's going on. It's not that things aren't going to change, though. They are. So over the last 50 years or so, there has been a shift in the types of jobs that are available. So if you look at jobs, there used to be in the past a lot more jobs that were about manufacturing. And those jobs are going to kind of go away with automation. So even if even if computers don't completely eliminate those jobs, there's going to be fewer of them. The shift is towards knowledge jobs, right? Technology jobs. Jobs that require physical labor are also going to kind of go away, or there's going to be fewer of them. So things like bricklayer are going to be somewhat automated in that you're going to get like whole sections of brick, so you won't need as many kind of bricks, individual bricklaying, and you're going to get, technology is going to make those jobs fewer. There's still going to be need for physical labor, particularly in healthcare. Let's see if I can work this, right? So this idea, we have demographic shifts in our population, in that people are becoming older, right? So that there's an aging of our general population. There's going to be an increased demand on healthcare, and so the physical labor jobs are going to be more in healthcare. There's going to be increased need for interpersonal skills. Can you hear me? Okay. Increased need for teamwork and technological skills as well. Okay, so these kinds of jobs are going to kind of fade into the background, and there's going to be more knowledge work, more technology work, more teamwork, interpersonal skills, and healthcare. So you don't have to take my word for it. There's information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. These are the kind of percentage change in the availability of jobs in the next 10 years or so. So information services are technology jobs. And then the last three on this list are all related to healthcare. Okay, so there's been other work by economists that talk about kind of classifying jobs by the types of tasks that are involved in those jobs, and then estimating how many jobs are going to go away. So there was an article by Fry and Osborne in 2017 that actually said, 47% of these low-skilled jobs are just going to be completely eliminated. And these are jobs that rely on, manual labor, routinized tasks. And then those jobs that are going to be preserved more so are those jobs that are associated with creative intelligence. So things like originality, fine arts, problem solving, those types of more complex work, and or social intelligence or interpersonal skills that can't be easily automated. It's funny to look at kind of some of the information in the news about artificial intelligence, about how there's artificial AI algorithms that are writing novels or screenplays, and these things are so bad. I think you can get on and Google those things. They're so terrible. They're just a bunch of non sequiturs. So we're very far away, I think, from a point at which artificial intelligence is going to be able to do creative things. Okay. So these are the high-risk jobs that estimated 47% of them are just going to completely go away. McKinsey and Company have a little bit of a more optimistic approach. Their approach isn't these jobs are completely going to go away. Their approach is there's some of the tasks within a job that are going to be automated. And so as we automate those tasks, maybe we'll have fewer people in those jobs, but there's still going to be a need for a human in those jobs. And so here's McKinsey and Company's information. These are jobs that have this is the percentage of tasks that could be automated within those jobs. And so here at the bottom, with the largest percentage of automation potential is accommodation and food services. And at the top is educational services. So we're going to need some people who are able to train and educate people. And then again, these are interpersonal professions, healthcare professions, et cetera. So one thing I find really interesting about these projections as a psychologist is related, for example, to this highest automation potential accommodation and food services. So maybe you've walked into a McDonald's, I have, I'll confess, in the past year, and there's a kiosk for you to order your food instead of going up to the counter. Nobody's currently using the kiosk. Like last time I was in the McDonald's, the person at the counter was telling us to use the kiosk, but they kind of didn't want us to use the kiosk because they knew that once everybody started using the kiosk that they weren't going to have their job anymore. Okay, so in fast food, you can kind of see that moving towards the ATM, right? You maybe can see in a fast food really transactional, you just need something quick, you're going to use the kiosk. When you look at some of these estimates about is your job going to be replaced by a machine or a robot, one of the jobs that comes up as high replaceability is that job of bartender. Okay, bartender. Because making a drink is a pretty routine activity. But it feels to me like the people who are doing these projections don't really understand why people go to bars. You don't really, you can make your drink at home. And you can do it pretty easily. Or go to restaurants to engage with servers, et cetera. So you kind of have to think about these things, like, is it really the case that, a bar that has a automatic drink maker is kind of a sad thing, I think. I don't know. It's my opinion. Okay. Maybe that's just the psychologist's perspective, but okay. And then meanwhile, we have increased diversity in the workforce. So in terms of race and gender and age. So I talked about the demographic shifts in the aging of the population. That's reflected in the workplace as well. So the fastest growing segment of workers in the US right now are workers between the ages of 65 and 69. Part of that is because workers didn't really work that long. Most time, that was a really small segment of the workforce before. People tended to retire at 65. And they would retire at 65, and then you might live 5 years later than retirement. Now, with extended lifespans, people are living 10, 20 years into retirement. So you have to finance that, and you have to figure out what you're going to do, right? So a lot of times people don't want to retire because they can't afford to retire, but a lot of times people don't want to retire because they actually like to work and continue to work. So sometimes they'll work in volunteer capacities, et cetera, but a lot of times, they want to kind of remain active. And so one of my main areas of research is actually workplace training and studying workplace training for adults that are 22 to 70. And we know very little, actually, about how to train 22 to 70-year-olds. And that's a huge span. I'll tell you right now, what I do know is that the brain of a 22-year-old doesn't work the same, from personal experience, as that of a 50-year-old or 60-year-old or 70-year-old. We have different skills. People who are younger have more of what we call fluid ability, where they can reason through novel problems pretty easily. They have good memory abilities. As we age, our strengths developmentally are that we have a lot of wisdom and knowledge, right? So we don't have to reason through novel problems all the time. And we have lower memory abilities, but we have all of this expertise that we can give. So that's going to change how we design and develop training interventions for workers. And so these are some of the things that we kind of have to keep in mind as we continue. Okay, so what are some of the implications of just some of these demographic shifts and infiltration of technology? Is that there's going to be increased polarization in terms of those jobs that are high skill, high pay, versus those jobs that are low skill, low pay, which means increased kind of polarization in our culture in terms of income gap, education gap, et cetera. So we are really at risk, I think, of leaving some people behind in the future of work, in that, and kind of increasing this, these differences. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about the psychology of work. I'm going to bring you back to my conference my Future of Work conference, where I was sitting there with all the computer scientists saying it would be so great if people didn't have to work. And that's that mindset that work is a toil, right? And we all feel that way sometimes, perhaps, like, gosh, this is very, my job, it's really stressful, and et cetera. But there is also a lot of work and research on the fact that people get a lot from their jobs. They get a lot of self-efficacy, they develop a purpose, they get feedback from others, they develop community through their jobs. So I want you to think about a job that you've had that you have, and think about the good parts of that job, and think about kind of some of the parts of that job that aren't your preference. So I want you to kind of think about that as we continue on here. So we can talk about jobs. We can talk about, people might have a job that they just go into and they kind of punch in the clock. We can talk about careers, or we can talk about, some of us have callings, so things that we feel compelled to do. Most of us are kind of in the career orientation. Most professionals are in kind of this career-orientated mindset. But even people who are anywhere on this spectrum are getting something from work. They're getting a purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. They're getting feedback and efficacy. There's been some qualitative work looking at, for example, janitors who work in educational settings and who have high job satisfaction, who've been in the job for years, and they do a great job. And they interviewed those people compared to other people, and those janitors who were doing the best job are the janitors who said, I'm here because I am providing a service to these kids. I'm helping educate the children of my community. And so, those are the things. People get a lot from their job, regardless of what kind of skill it is. So, Sigmund Freud is one of the forefathers of psychology. He said a lot of wacky stuff. I'm not going to lie, he's a little bit out there. But this is one thing that he said: love and work, work and love, that's really all there is, right? People have a need for achievement, and they get that a lot from their work. So this idea that computers and technology are going to let us just sit around all day, to a psychologist seems like a really kind of terrible idea, right? Because people get a lot of purpose from their work. All right, so we also have, this is where I want you to think about the characteristics of the jobs that you've had. So we have, in psychology, the way that we study work is we think about how complex is the job. We can kind of think about the job tasks on two dimensions. On the job complexity dimension, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Job complexity dimension, and then an autonomy dimension. So how complex is the job? How demanding is it? The tasks that are associated with that job. And then, do I have decision latitude in my job? Can I actually make decisions? Do I have control over when I work? Do I have control over what I work on, for example? Okay, and so what we see is that we can kind of put these in 4 different quadrants. So in this upper right-hand quadrant are active jobs. These are jobs that are high in complexity, they're high in demand, but they're also high in autonomy. So even though I have to do a lot of stuff, I'm really engaged and active in my work, I also have a lot of control over when I do it, right? And so these are highly engaging and highly active jobs. And an example of this job is a professor, right? So most professors can kind of choose what they want to work on and when they work on it, and this is all relative. So if you choose, for example, to write a grant that nobody wants to fund, then that's your choice, but you may not be successful at that job. So these are all things that are relative, but you have relative autonomy in that job. Over here, you have more passive jobs. So these are jobs that are less complex, that you may be doing kind of the same activity over and over again, and you don't have a lot of autonomy. So you may be working kind of on a kitchen line, for example, or working as custodial staff or something like that. There's not a lot of complexity. You're doing the same thing, and you kind of work for somebody else. You're taking demands, taking orders from somebody else. Up here are these low-strain jobs. So these are jobs that are lower in complexity, but high in autonomy. And what's interesting about thinking about what types of jobs fall into this category is that a lot of them are these new gig economy jobs, right? So Uber driver, for example. I can decide when I want to work, what I want to do, but the job's not that complex. So it's a low-strain job, but I have control over it. And then these high-strain jobs are jobs that are high in complexity and high in demand, where you don't have a lot of autonomy. So I had a job, I'll complain a little bit now. I had a job when I first graduated from college that was a customer service rep for an insurance company. So I had to know all of the products, and I didn't have any autonomy in how I solved people's problems. So I just had to kind of follow the line. And that was a hard job. These high-strain jobs are super stressful, right? Because you have to do all of the work, it's very complex, and you don't have any say in when you do it or how you do it, et cetera. So what is some of the future of work that we talked about? How is that going to affect this matrix? Well, it's going to increase these active and high-strain jobs. These low-strain jobs, I don't know so much. This is our gig economy. That's kind of a wild card. But these more passive jobs are going to kind of go away. So what are some of the implications of that in terms of what we can do? Is training, right? People need to be brought along that are in this lower quadrant to understand. They need to develop the skills so that they can continue to contribute in the future of work. So, and organizations need to attend to this too, because to really attract talent, the talent that has the skills to survive in this future of work, organizations are going to need to say, this is how we're going to develop you, because people are going to need to continue to develop through the lifespan. So we need to, organizations need to train, and we need to kind of bring people along. MOOCs, I don't know, how many of you know what a MOOC is, these massive open online courses? These developed about 10 years ago, and the idea behind a MOOC was to democratize the education system. So we have them at Rice. These are online courses that are provided through Coursera or edX or another service provider that are taught by high impact professors at MIT, at Rice, at other places. And you can take these courses regardless of, you don't have to get in anywhere, you just kind of take them, they're online. Regardless of your socioeconomic background, you can take them regardless of your age, you just kind of engage in world-class education. So it was thought that these were going to kind of democratize education. Well, it turns out, 10 years later, that the people who use MOOCs are not people in lower socioeconomic kind of areas or areas of the world that are developing. The people who are using MOOCs a lot are people who are doing skill retraining for jobs. So you can take a massive open online course in computer science to get coding skills, et cetera. So they're a good vehicle, and they're turning out to be a good vehicle for skill retraining. And then we have to attend to, attending to bringing everybody along. You may recognize this fellow here, John Cornyn, our senior senator from Texas. He is engaging in this Google and Goodwill partnership to do skill and job training for people of all socioeconomic walks of life, to do kind of training and retraining. And one of the things is, he's not the youngest guy, so he's here learning, right? So people of all ages, we're going to have to start designing, developing training interventions. That's something that's super interesting to me, of course, for people of all ages. Okay. So when I asked you to think about the job that you had or have had, I'm sure that you might have thought about social aspects of work that were important or engaging for you in a job. In organizational psychology, we have studied and we've tended to focus on job tasks. So we look at social job tasks. So if I'm in a customer service job, I'm interacting with people. If I'm in a management job, I need to have emotional intelligence. I need to have interpersonal skills to interact with people and to get them to kind of do what I want them to do, make them think it's their idea, that kind of stuff. So we have focused on those things. We focused a little bit less on on the ambient context of work, social context of work. So when people are at work, we know that they get something out of being around other people. And there's just some burgeoning research on this that is related to the different types of relationships people have at work. So if I'm at work and I'm working on my Excel spreadsheet and I need to do a pivot table and I'm like, I don't know how to do that, I'll say, Bob, do you know how to do a pivot table? And he'll come over and he'll help me with that. And he's doing a service to me and he's doing a service to the organization by helping me with that. So that kind of instrumental social exchange that happens in a workplace is important for the success of employees, that kind of on-the-job training, and it's also important for the success of organizations as well. There's also other ambient social activity that happens in the workplace, and that's just that you make friends there. You develop social connection, and social connection is important for worker well-being and for health and just psychological well-being too. So these are the two kind of different types of kind of more ambient social activity that's going on. So we know that these things are important. How does the future of work kind of impact those two things? People have increased autonomy with technology. You may yourself or be in a workplace where people don't have to necessarily come in anymore. They can handle everything kind of through email. They may have, particularly if they have a lot of autonomy in their job, they can work from home, a majority of the time, and Skype in when they need to meet, et cetera. So technology gives us a lot of that flexibility. But what it changes is then the social context of work. So people aren't necessarily connecting with other people as much as they used to. And one of the things that is just fascinating to me as a work psychologist is that when you walk into Starbucks on a weekday in the day, you might as well be walking into an office. There are so many people working in Starbucks now because you get isolated when you're working alone, and isolation is not good. Right? So while we can work kind of independently, that can lead to some isolation. There's also popping up all over the place. I was just in Austin yesterday. I noticed they have a big WeWork building downtown. So people are now paying to rent spaces in communal workplaces, not only so they can have meetings in those places, but also so that they can just have people who kind of are doing what we call social facilitation, who are just working alongside of them. So it's kind of this interesting dynamic about how changes in the social context of work that are a function of technology are affecting behavior because people are social animals. They want to be around other people. And so we kind of have to attend to that as well. Okay, so the bottom line, so what's my message, right? Well, I wish I knew, but I'm sure you do too. But the bottom line is that what we know is that there are going to be changes. I don't think all the jobs are going to go away. I think the jobs will continue to evolve. But what I wanted to do is to plant a seed here in that there are some things that we need to attend to, right? We need to attend to bringing everybody along, trying to understand how the future of work can kind of increase this polarization in our society. So to make sure that we kind of think about being inclusive, because there's going to be changes in what we do, how we do it, and with whom. So we need to bring everybody along in terms of training and retraining. And I would really, I'm a psychologist, so I think about this. We need to attend to this human experience of work, that it's more than just, it would be great if work were eliminated. It's actually, there's a purpose for why we work. And we engage with others, we get satisfaction, we get self-efficacy. If you're working for pay or not working for pay or volunteering, it doesn't matter. These are the activities that we're talking about. All right, so that's all I have. I wanted to leave some time for questions. And here is my email address too, if you have any follow-up questions. Yeah? So the question is about open office plans and closed office plans. And this is a really interesting question as well, I think. I think we all kind of hop on these bandwagons and we say, okay, open office plan is great. But there are individual differences, right, in people. So we have people are different in terms of introversion, extroversion. And an open office plan is a nightmare for an introverted person because they get their energy from kind of being alone, and they may have, it may not be effective for them. And it also depends on what task you're doing. So if you are working on a task that is collaborative versus a task that is writing, it doesn't matter whether you're introverted or extroverted. You're going to do better and focused attention better if you don't have a lot of ambient noise. And that we know as well in psychology. So they're now moving away from this open office plan. Everybody got on the bandwagon, and then they thought, well, no, now nobody's getting any work done, so we're going to have to move to a closed office plan. So I think the idea is that these social relationships are super important regardless of what the office plan is. They kind of are overarching from the office plan. So you can have these really good social exchange relationships even in closed office plans. And I think the idea is that what we need to be is more flexible. And maybe that's where the WeWork thing comes in too, is that people can go there and they can get a quiet office cubicle like you would in the library here. Many of you may remember those, right? You can get this little cubicle or carrel, and then you can also have a time where you're out and maybe socializing a little bit more with people. So that flexibility is kind of going to be key because there's individual differences and different tasks that people are doing. Yep, right here. Yeah.
But haven't we had corruption in the workplace since the Industrial Revolution started? I mean, that's what Catholic always disrupted. New jobs, we've got new jobs that didn't.
Right.
It's going to keep changing.
Right.
The whole system still gets.
Well, yeah, I don't have a commentary on the value of the system, but so the question is about, we've always had disruption, and that's absolutely true. That's why I don't believe this robot apocalypse argument. I mean, I just don't believe it. I think historically, if we look at the Industrial Revolution or we look at the advent of the personal computer, there were predictions about how we were all going to have so much more leisure time after these machines were introduced. And maybe that's true for some people, but for the majority of us, I don't think we feel less busy than we might have felt, 50 years ago. So absolutely there are disruptions, but I think we need to, what I'm asking is to prepare for to think about what are the specific types of disruption that might come through from the recent advances in technology, and for us to really consider that in the context of this human experience of work. Yeah, right here. Yeah, so there is going to be a lot of competition for talent. And so my sense of it is when we go consult with organizations, so the question, I'm sorry, was how can organizations kind of adapt with this future of work to attract those high skill employees? And it really will be about attracting people who have high skills and will want to continue to learn. Because people are going to have to continue to, update their skills in this future. Because technology is always changing, and so I think organizations, there's going to be more. It's kind of this. It almost feels like a contradiction, because I'm saying that some people may be out of work, but then there's going to be a lot of competition for certain types of workers, and that's true. And so the companies that can offer certain types of workers, state-of-the-art training and development, and these growth opportunities are going to be the kinds of workers that the kind of organizations where these workers want to go to, and organizations are going to get reputations for that. It's also, we have this gig economy, which is a little bit new as well. So there's a lot more kind of these individual companies that are emerging, which is interesting. Yeah. Right. Right, so the question is about education and some of these, what we would call vocational technical careers. I am a huge fan of vocational technical education. I think that there will always be need for these kind of individual services. And I think what I'm arguing here is not that everybody needs a college education. What I'm arguing is that people need to kind of prepare for constant skill updating in whatever profession that they have chosen. So I do think there will be a need for these more individual family service, service providers. And absolutely, vocational technical school is, those are lucrative careers, and we need to really think about that as well. There's not going to potentially be as many as some of these manufacturing jobs, and we're already seeing some of those go away, though. Yeah.
It does seem like there's a bit of a race.
Yeah, so, I mean, so the question is, do you see an urgency around kind of decreasing this polarization? Because the rate of, this is the change, this is something that's new, is how rapidly technology is increasing. So I think that academics are certainly talking about that. I think there are programs through, federal programs through like National Science Foundation, et cetera, on educating people for the future of work, et cetera. We are going to need organizations to come along in that regard. So there's only so much I think the federal government can do to engage workers, and it's going to be entities like educational entities and organizations that are going to maybe make these contributions, but they're going to have to be for, they're going to be designed for the jobs that the organizations want people to do. So it would be nice if the organizations provided that type of training. Yeah. Yeah.
So work together and they go to a place like this.
Mm-hmm.
So from a business perspective or management perspective, and I would say
Yeah.
or maybe that's not the element. Maybe the element is like
Right.
something off the cleaners.
Yeah, so the question is about, designing workplaces that will, that can kind of serve this purpose of engaging workers. And this is just warming my heart, because this is what we do. This is part of the industrial organizational psychologist, is really studying the culture of workplaces. So what is it, can we design these workplaces to meet the needs of the employees in terms of the social needs, as well as kind of the task development needs, et cetera. And so, yeah, I think there is a lot that organizations can do to examine the culture and examine the needs of the employees to engage in flex time, for example. There's a lot of employers who are looking at these types of things, and this type of thing is going to be super important for, again, attracting these high skill, high knowledge workers into the future. So people are going to want the organization to do something for them, because they're going to have, the high talent workers are going to be able to, maybe make some demands in those regards. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so organizations may outsource some of that stuff into the future.
It's more flexible for the organization. Large amount of space. They can get
That's
the
right.
amount of space that they want.
That's right. So it depends on what the organization's goals are, too. So if you think about the fact that a lot of people are kind of commuting in, then the organization doesn't need the space for them. The organization doesn't necessarily need the infrastructure for them, and the employees kind of taking that all on themselves. So in some ways, it's an advantage for the organization. But what I think the cost of that is that when your employees are working so independently and individually, you're not getting that kind of instrumental benefit of working together. They're not training each other. They're not doing that on-the-job. Training is so much more difficult when you're sitting alone in your home office than it is if you're at the site. So, and maybe WeWork would help with that. But if you're all working, the advantage of everybody working in the same unit on the same activity is that they can help each other with that activity. So that's something that we're starting to study a lot more in organizational and industrial psychology, and just these ambient social interactions at work and the value of those things to workers, both in the kind of instrumental area and also in the social exchange. So what am I getting? I like connecting with other people who I work with. One more question. Yeah, right here. The pros and cons of Yeah, so I think we do study teamwork. This is a really hot topic. Interdisciplinary teams are the way that organizations get things done, and so those teamwork skills are increasingly important. Teams, though, for the purpose, teams have to be focused on an outcome. So sometimes there's this development of team and rah-rah teamwork where you don't necessarily have an outcome that you're going for. You kind of think it's a good idea to develop a team. So there have to be specific goals that are attached with the tasks and activities. There's a lot of research on the different composition of team members. So having, leaders, doers, that type of thing. So there's a whole literature on that. But they're good things, good stuff. Okay, I got to stop. So I'm going to stop. Thank you so much for coming, and have a great day. It was my pleasure to be here.